Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Today, it's time to upgrade your toaster to 2.0.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Seth Nelson, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Pete Wright. Today, we're talking to Karen Covy, author of When Happily Ever After Ends: How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. Karen has been working as a divorce professional for over 25 years as a mediator, arbitrator, decision coach, and more. She's come up with an online program called Divorce Roadmap 2.0 that helps people navigate the challenges that come with divorce. Her mission as a divorce coach is to educate and empower people to get through their divorce with less damage, conflict, and expense. Karen, welcome to the Toaster.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Divorce Roadmap 2.0 is Divorce Roadmap 1.0. You just drive right off the cliff.
Thelma and Louise.
Is that what's happening there?
I saw that movie.
Yes.
Exactly. But it doesn't have the best ending. So the 2.0 version is hopefully going to give you a better ending.
I hope so. Look, I started reading up on your material online, and I know Seth is going to love this. There's a lot that's positioned on using your lawyering resources reasonably. Like, let's use your lawyer for what they're really good for. Now, Seth's a divorce lawyer, and you're a divorce lawyer, and you're just are pitching. Let's use your divorce lawyer less. Let's do less lawyering in the divorce process.
Yeah, but Pete, when you said that, like, what came to mind when you said, let's use your lawyer for what they're really good for, I just threw in the word nothing in my head.
That is not true.
There are statutes, may it please the court. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the divorce, just to get us into the program. I thought we'd talk a little bit about what the Divorce Roadmap 2.0 is, and then let's use the opportunity. We have the two divorce lawyering brains on the show, plus me, and let's build an actual case for how you can use your divorce lawyer the best. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right, let's do it. Tell us about the roadmap first.
Okay, so the Divorce Roadmap is an online program that people can access 24/7 on any device they have, anytime they want, for as long as they want. And it gives them an overview of how the whole process works, and then gives them an overview of the different areas that they're going to have to deal with in a divorce, like lawyers, like kids, like what process do you want to use? How does it work? And how do you figure out which process is going to be the best for you? So it is primarily an educational tool delivered through videos and a lot of handouts, a lot of spreadsheets, worksheets, checklists, whatever you need to help you.
Whoa. Back up.
Okay.
Karen, you're talking so fast. I got excited. You said it has spreadsheets?
Yeah, it's got a spreadsheet in it.
Nice. I'm signing up. I'm signing up, Pete.
We got to tell Andy to warn people not to say the word spreadsheets. The Pavlovian response is so fast for you. Your face got all flushed.
It's clickbait. I love it. I know. I'm so excited.
Oh, my God.
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
No,
I
you weren't
know.
warned. How could you have known? Now I just have to clean up the mess. All right, spreadsheets. We're going to put that away. No, it really is. I mean, it's a useful tool. What got you to the point where you thought, okay, there have to be two sides to this. One, I'm going to help the people that I'm working with, and two, I'm going to create this tool that's going to help me solve some problems in my lawyering. Right? Like, this education tool has to help you too, right?
It does, because then people have all kinds of weird expectations about what's going to happen in a divorce and what's not. What is my lawyer going to do and what is my lawyer not going to do? And when people have expectations that aren't based in reality, they expect something from their lawyer that the lawyer's never going to give them, and then they get upset, right? And then the lawyer's upset because the people are upset, and then it's not a good place to be. And the genesis for all of this was years and years ago when I was practicing law. I had a small office. It was only my secretary and me in the office. It was hot. I was with a client. The door was open. So my secretary heard the conversation after the client left. And the secretary had worked for a bunch of big law firms in Chicago. She said, no one else does that. And I said, what? And she said, because I went through all of the processes and all of the choices that they had and explained everything to them. And she said most lawyers, the ones that she had worked for, and they were the big kahunas in the city, she said, they don't do that. They just, and I said, well, what do they do? And she said, they tell the people what they're going to do. And I didn't think I had that right? It's not my life. I can tell you what your choices are, but I think I'm obligated to tell you your choices. And so that's what I did. And I realized that there was a need for that kind of education for people from someone, in a way that they could relate to and rely on. So that's what I created.
Because divorce is not an oil change, Seth.
It's not.
Pete, we've got our title of the show. Divorce is not an oil change. And I don't mean this show. I'm actually going to lobby Andy to change from how to split a toast to divorce is not an oil change. But even when you get an oil change, don't you have some peripheral decisions to make? Like, do you want to rotate your tires? Can we fill out some other things? All
right. There might be a spreadsheet involved.
But there you go. But Karen, I like what you said about giving clients choices, because as we've talked about before, Pete, when you're reaching an agreement, you can reach an agreement in the great state of Florida, check your local jurisdiction, that the court can't actually order in court, such as paying for college. So that's a choice that you have. Maybe you agree you both will contribute towards your children's college education, but in exchange for that, you're not going to divide this account between the two of you. You're setting it aside outside of the division. You're earmarking it for the kids' college. Judge cannot do that, but you can reach that agreement. And that's just a choice that people have to make, right?
There are a lot of choices people will face in divorce that they never think about.
Well, and that leads us to our principal question, that let's just say it's time for me to get a divorce. How do I walk in 8 a.m. day one to my attorney's office and start that conversation with an eye toward making the proper use of that legal resource?
It starts by understanding what your lawyer can do. And it helps if you're walking into a lawyer. First of all, I'm going to assume you've chosen a lawyer, right? And you walk into a lawyer, and if you understand what you're going to have to bring to the table, you can say to the lawyer, okay, what documents am I going to need? How can I organize them in a way that saves me money because it's the way you use, right? Do you want digital or do you want paper? Do you want, like the little tiny things? And the more organized you are and the more you can work with your lawyer as a team, the better experience both of you are going to have, the less money you're going to spend, and your lawyer is also not going to lose their mind, doing things in an inefficient way rather than efficiently.
And on that point, Pete, I know some people are thinking like, are you serious? Like, I'm going through a divorce. I'm totally stressed out, and I'm not an organized person to start with. It's always an ambition of mine, right? It's okay. If you're not organized, it's okay. We have ways to help you get through the process. So if you come to me and you say, I am never going to get you these documents that you're asking for, I'm unorganized, and I can say, thank you for letting me know. This is how we can solve this problem. Let's schedule 2 hours for you to come into our office and sit down with a paralegal and get ready. Bring your laptop or bring your, whatever device. Because if you don't remember your password, we're going to do log into bank account, change password, forgot password. You'll get the code. Let's do it right now. And we can help you download all those documents. And that will actually be less expensive than that same paralegal sending you follow-up email, telephone call, me calling you, telling you we're getting closer, getting a client conference on, hey, what's going on with your documents? So it's okay if you're not organized. But coming to the table and saying, hey, Karen, this sounds great, but it's horrible. How can I do this when I'm not an organized person? What would you say to that, Karen?
What you said makes total sense. It's about knowing who you are and knowing where you're at. Maybe you're normally an organized person, but you're in the middle of a divorce. You're an emotional wreck. You're not organized now. That's okay. But don't pretend that you are and have your lawyer chase you, because it's the millions of emails and follow-up calls and the court appearances to say to the judge, I don't have that. I'll get back to you. Don't worry, give me another 30 days. all of that costs money and takes time.
Well, this is helping me because this is, I'm trying to provide a framework for myself that says, what can I expect? What kind of coaching am I getting from my lawyer? What can I expect them to say to me? And one is they're going to want to find out how organized I am. So one, stop lying to myself and don't lie to them about how organized I am, right? Let's just cut to it and know that one way or another, we're going to have a problem to solve. And that is getting organized. That can be easy or hard. Okay. What's number two? Like organizing paperwork, statements, that's one. Number two?
It starts by knowing what you want. So many times, lawyers, they're trying to resolve a divorce case and they say to you one day, they say to their client, hey, what about this? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. Okay, that sounds okay. And then they call you the next day, you go, no, I've changed my mind. And then the next day it's, no, I've changed my mind. And sometimes it's like trying to pin Jell-O to a wall. And from the lawyer's perspective, they cannot settle a case. They're not going to settle it based on what they want. It's not their divorce. They need to settle it based on what you're okay with. And that means you have to know what you're okay with.
Is it fair for me to say your lawyer actually doesn't care about the one way or another, right? This is not an emotional decision for you.
You mean for the lawyer?
Yeah, because,
Yeah. So, Pete, here's what I think you're saying. Client comes to me and says, I don't know what I really want to do about spring break. Should I do it every other year where I get the full spring break and my spouse gets the even years and I get odd years? Or should we split it in half? As a lawyer, I do not care on that outcome. Ultimately, if you don't care. But if my client says to me, I really love spring break. Every year we take a trip. I don't want to divide it in half because I think that's going to mess us up. I'd rather have it every other year. Now I know what you want. I'm going to go argue for that, either in mediation, negotiations, in court, whichever it may be. But if you come to me and I don't really care, what I would tell a client, here's the positives and negatives. Because I've done hundreds, if not thousands of these cases, thousands of them. I've lived it in my own life for the last, I can't believe this, Pete, almost 16 years since my former spouse and I got divorced, right? So I have that experience of raising a child in that environment. But ultimately, I can tell you positive and negatives, but ultimately I don't care. And it's not that I don't care as in care. This is not what you're paying me to do for you, right? Did I get that right, Karen? And Pete loves it when I'm wrong, so feel free.
Yeah, I have a bell.
No, I think you are 100% right. It's not about, I don't think caring is probably the best word choice. It's not that a lawyer doesn't care if you have all of spring break or half of spring break. It's like, it's not for them to say. It's not their family.
Well, and that was actually kind of my point. And I like kind of where that went because, to Seth's point, your lawyer will care a lot when you tell them what you want. When you tell them essentially what to care about, they will fight for it and care about it. But until that point, they're not going to make decisions for you.
Exactly.
Which puts you in a bind if you're having trouble making the decisions. And I know Karen has a lot to say about that. So I like to use this phrase because Pete always does it. Let's pivot to that.
Okay, that was a great phrase.
Man.
Yeah, Pete, I stole it from Pete.
But I tell people that what they don't realize about divorce, or at least most people don't realize, is that you are going to have to make more major life decisions in a limited time frame than you will at any other time in your life. So getting through a divorce is really, in some ways, a decision-making exercise, and being able to make a good decision starts by knowing what you want. And it starts even before the divorce, knowing if that's what you want or not. And it carries through every negotiating item in your divorce. Do you want A or do you want B? Do you want, 2 weeks in the summer consecutively, or do you want them separate? What do you want? And only you can decide that.
So how do you coach people through that decision-making process? Somebody comes in and they're totally stymied about spring break. They're totally stymied about who gets the car or who gets the house. Like, where do you start if they just can't land on that point of readiness to make a decision?
It starts with understanding. First of all, I've got to make sure that they understand what their choices are, right? You can't make a decision unless you know what all of your choices are. So it starts always with getting information, seeing what all of the options are, and then doing the work inside that says, what is it? What matters to me? Because if you know what the most important things are to you and you make decisions with those goals in mind, you are going to make better decisions. If you just look at every decision in a divorce as a one-off, that's when you end up at the end of your divorce going, wait, how did this happen? How did I end up with this? Isn't what I wanted.
So let me give you an example of that, Pete, that applies to a lot of people, whether kids or not. You're married, you own a house together.
Okay.
There's 4 choices. You sell the house, split the funds. One person keeps the house, right? But the other person's going to want to get their equity out, half of it, right? I'm going to talk about other issues there. The other person wants to keep the house, right? And the fourth one is the worst one. You get divorced and you stay living in the house together. That one's pretty easy to knock out.
Is that what? Does that happen?
It's a choice. I'm not saying it's a good one, but I've had it happen because they couldn't afford at the time to sell it. The market was down. The house was upside down. Think 2008.
Yeah, I guess.
Right? They didn't have money to come to the table. They didn't want to go into bankruptcy. There's a lot of reasons, but they didn't want to be married.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a choice. Okay. That's a choice. Tough one.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
So let's eliminate that. But I think the lawyer's job is to, one, explain the choices, and then the ramifications of those choices. If you're going to keep the house, is your name on the mortgage? Is your spouse's name on the mortgage? Do you have to refinance or get their name off the mortgage? Can you afford to do that? What's the down payment? What's the interest rate? Do you have enough income to support it on your own? There's all these practical things that we have to discuss and maybe do some independent research / verification with a mortgage lender, a broker, your bank, all those items before we make the decision. Right? Karen, am I on the right track here?
You're totally on the right track. And
2 for 2, Pete. Just saying. 2 for 2.
I don't love how this is going.
Although I'll give you a little bone here, Pete.
Oh, good. Okay.
That there is another option that I have seen happen too, which is not necessarily a good option, but it's that the two people continue to co-own the house together, although one person leaves. And so the one person's in the house, both of them are still co-owners, and usually that's done for X number of years until the youngest kid goes to college or something like that. And then the house is sold. And that when you have people continuing to co-own a house after a divorce, it can work beautifully, or it can be a total nightmare because you have to try to think in advance of everything that could go wrong. And that's not easy.
And now you're talking what ifs. Who pays for when the roof leaks?
Exactly.
Who pays when the water heater goes out, right? Well, wait a minute. I'm living in the house. I'm paying the mortgage, the taxes, and the insurance, but the mortgage payment is part principal and part interest. And so I'm paying down principal every month. In 3 years from now, when our youngest kids graduates high school and we sell it, why does my spouse get half of that pay down of the mortgage?
And what about appreciation? What if the house is worth more in 3 years? They're going to get the value of that. But what about depreciation? Nobody wants to think their house will be worth less, but 2008 proved to all of us that can happen. So you have to think of so many things in advance that it's not the cleanest choice. Let's put it that way.
Well, that gets lets me find the rails again, because you guys both just presented about 24 what ifs, and now my head is spinning again.
And on those what ifs, your head is spinning. Those are the hardest things to negotiate because they're what ifs.
Yeah,
and everybody is doing the what if down the road as if it's negatively impacting them Therefore, they want the best outcome on the what if now.
Because we're all stars of our own movies.
Exactly.
And you can spend a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money in attorney's fees negotiating what ifs that never ever happen.
Okay, so family law attorneys, how do I get myself out of the what ifs? How do you ground me back in the reality of the decision I have to make now?
It's simple. I just send you to Karen.
It's about, again, I hate to keep harping on it, comes down to what you want, but what's important to you. If it's important to you that your kid stays in the house, until high school is over and there's no other way to do it, okay, well then maybe the what ifs, the danger of the what ifs, you're willing to deal with that. But if there's any way you can make a clean break, that's going to be a whole lot better for everybody because it's just one and done and you move on. But it's, what it really is about? It's about risk assessment and risk tolerance. What are you willing to live with? For what reason?
And to add to that, Pete, to get you out of the ultimate decision, you get away from that position. The position is, I want to keep the house, I want to sell it, whatever. And you talk about your underlying reasoning for that decision. I want to keep the house because it's in a good school district. I want to keep the house because on my income, I'm not going to be able to afford to refinance and pay the higher interest rates that are going up. I want to keep the house because it's 1.5 miles from my parents and I'm caring for my elderly parents. So you got to look at the underlying reasons that you are getting to the ultimate conclusion or position. Because if you're dealing with the reasons, then maybe you can come up with a different solution, such as, well, wait a minute. In this division of assets, you're going to get a large cash payment. So maybe you can use that to put down on a new house and you don't have the high interest. And by the way, you're in a 4-bedroom now, and just 1 mile on the other side of your parents' house is a 2-bedroom that you can maybe buy for cash. So you can start getting to different solutions if you know the interests. But if it's just, I want to keep the house, you've got nowhere to go with that. You can't work the problem.
It's just a line in the sand, right? It's just a more like a hard line. It's a line in cement, right? It's just here's a statement. It's not a discussion.
Right.
How often do discussions like this lead down, from the perspective of the law, a discussion around sort of the path of least resistance? Like, here's what we can do most easily. Here's the easy thing versus here's the thing you want. Is that kind of, if I come to you, is that a discussion I need to be ready for, or do you weigh in on least resistance options?
Shoot, Karen, because I know my answer.
Of course, always. Here's the thing: is as a lawyer, and I know lawyers get a bad rap, but most divorce lawyers I know are really trying to do a good job, right? And they wouldn't be doing this in this kind of area of the law where there's so much emotion involved if they didn't care. Most of them care, and they want to do what's best for the client. So they're really doing their best, and they're trying to give the client options. And they're going to say, this one's the path of least resistance. This one is the cleanest. This is going to be in my opinion, would be the one that will be the best for you, but it's your life. If you want the other one, as long as you know what's involved, full disclosure, here's what you're going to face, it's still your choice.
And along those lines, Pete, just this morning, I was drafting a very complex marital settlement agreement that had a lot of moving parts, a lot of what ifs, a lot of, if this happens, we're now in a different area of law, because it was dealing with trusts and estates. And so the more I drafted it, I was like, this is not good. And not that it wasn't a bad deal. Like, I was drafting what everyone was basically saying they wanted to accomplish. And I got a hold of an estate trust lawyer. I said, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? I've been trying to get a hold of him, and I got a hold of him, and he gave me some of the concerns that he had from that perspective, that area of law. Ultimately, I came up with a simpler way. It changed the deal. It had some things that maybe one side didn't want, but because it was simpler, they were willing to do it. We had a solution for that. So I took what was going to be a very complex legal document and simplified it, which if you can keep it simple, it is usually an easier, better outcome. Not in all cases. Sometimes you have complexities that you just have to have. But if you can keep it simple, I think that's always the way to go.
I couldn't agree more.
3 for 3, Pete. 3 for 3. I'm just keeping count over here today.
You know, I'm sure you have some lawyering to do. Karen and I can do this on our own. Karen, you were saying.
But I just wanted to, say like how brilliant Seth is, because that's exactly right. I'm sorry, but the more moving parts that there are in a document, the more complicated it is, the more it's liable to come under attack later, and the more you give some lawyer in the future an opportunity to find a hole in the document, because it's impossible for anyone to think of everything all the time that could ever happen in the future. Like, who thought COVID would be a thing? It's a thing, right? So you can't foresee the future.
When I find myself putting mathematical formulas and attaching Excel spreadsheets, I get very excited, but I know it's probably not the best legal document.
According to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, approximately 10% of children live with a parent with an alcohol use disorder.
This is an alarming statistic as a family law professional who deals with custody cases regularly.
Finding the balance between the child's safety and helping the child maintain a relationship with both parents is one of the hardest things to navigate. Add in the he said, she said phenomenon that happens with divorcing couples who often weaponize alcohol use against one another, and the situation is even more difficult.
All of this is why Soberlink has been one of the most important tools for my clients dealing with these issues. Soberlink's remote alcohol monitoring tool has helped over 500,000 people prove their sobriety and provide peace of mind regarding the child's safety. Soberlink helps keep the focus on the best interest of the child, which is really the most important part in a divorce case dealing with children. I've teamed up with Soberlink to create a parenting plan guide to help people going through divorce that involves alcohol in children.
And you can download it today at Soberlink.com/toaster. And if you take a look and you think you're ready to order Soberlink, just mention how to split a toaster for $50 off their device price.
Our thanks to Soberlink for sponsoring How to Split a Toaster.
I feel like in the spirit of knowing what you want and getting yourself organized, I keep landing on this idea of what is it, or this question of what is it that tends to make a divorce more complicated? Is it that you come in emotionally disorganized or intellectually disorganized?
I never really thought of it that way, but my gut reaction would say emotionally. I mean, every decision you make, whether people want to believe it or not, research has shown that every decision that we make, from what to have to breakfast to what to wear to, what to do in our divorce, is all emotionally based. We want to think that we make decisions logically and rationally. What really happens is you make the decision emotionally, then you justify it after the fact, logically or rationally. So I would have to go with, the emotional decision. The emotional disorganization is the hardest to deal with.
I mean, to that point, Seth, is it the emotion that actually made that marriage settlement agreement more complicated? Or is it that everybody was just so savvy with what they wanted that, they were critically able to make your life worse?
I think there's some emotional aspects to what I was drafting. Absolutely. In the way things wanted to lay out there. But I do find when people get to the intellectual challenges of making these decisions, part of that is that grieving process. So if you have someone at acceptance, they're like, yeah, this is a business transaction, let's go. Right? That's that's easy on that side. And then they're frustrated because the other side isn't at acceptance yet in the grieving process, right?
To them, you're just trying to steal their house, right, in the divorce,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
exactly. And they're still emotionally attached. And here's the thing is, I think lawyers get street cred for being lawyers, and people think we're smarter than we are. Okay. I've seen a lot of lawyers that aren't necessarily the brightest bulb, right? But they passed the bar. They're practicing law. So when you say less complicated, some people are like, well, wait, I thought it was always complicated. But when you can take something that is complicated and simplify it, that I think is great lawyering. I don't want people to think like, oh, this is simple. It's not. I used to practice my opening arguments and my legal arguments in the car to Kai when he was 8 years old. Because if I can explain it to an 8-year-old, I actually knew the judge might get it.
Okay. All right. Next week, all the judges Seth has ever worked with. Stay tuned.
Yes. I'm changing jurisdictions
immediately.
now.
Yes. Hello, Alabama. All this is making me think, and I know it's a hard process going through a divorce, but all this is making me think as we structure what you need to do to have a better, more efficient, more effective relationship with your lawyer. The question goes the other way, and really that's what we're talking about. What do I need to do to be a better divorce client for you, right? What do I need to do? Because if I become a better divorce client, that is, it sounds like sort of by definition, going to make a smoother divorce.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Pete, this is what happens in what they teach you in law school, and then what they don't teach you in law school, and what happens every day in every lawyer's practice that's dealing with litigation or some other contentious divorce or otherwise. You're presented with a series of, I'll put it in quotes, facts. A client comes in and starts telling you a story. And your job as the lawyer, if you let them tell the whole story, is to figure out what was relevant, what's not, what applies to the law, what's the problem, what are you trying to solve, what can the law do for you on that? Are there exceptions to the rule? Is there an exception to the exception of the rule, which just means you're right back at the rule to start with because two negatives makes a positive? That's what they teach you. What they don't teach you, and I've learned this over my years of practice, is I ask my client to start with their question. Don't give me the story and then give me the question. Start with the question. So here's what I mean by that. Well, I bought the house premarital before we got married. And then we did an addition to it. And then we, it got a tree fell on it and an insurance claim came in. And I took that money and I put it into my grandmother's account because we owed her money. And then the next thing I know that we were getting a divorce, but like a week before he asked if he could put his name on the house. And I thought that we were kind of rekindling. And so is the house mine or his?
I see what you did there. And let me just say, for the non-lawyers out there, what Seth just did must be hysterical to other lawyers because Karen is just rolling right now. And I'm just looking at this like, this is how I tell stories.
Exactly. And you're not hiring a lawyer to listen to your story. You're hiring your lawyer to solve a legal problem for you. And what happens is, and I get this a lot because I do free consultations. They are so thankful that they got a lawyer on the phone and they just want to tell their story. And I'm always like, wait a minute, if I could wave a magic wand and fix your problem, what's the problem? So I have them start there, which then leads me to ask a series of questions to get the relevant information I need to give them a legal opinion, right?
One of our very early episodes, you made it very clear that you, as a lawyer, are not my friend. And I took great umbrage with that because I thought in the movies that we were supposed to be friends when we golfed together and, all that stuff. But what you just described, it sounds to me, is a bartender.
Which I'm happy to be your bartender.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot different than being a friend. I'll tell you, Pete, I've never gotten a tip for being a lawyer.
Yeah, right. And you might just be the most expensive bartender too. So I'm just saying, you serve good stuff.
I mean, I've never been like, objection, Your Honor, and then the court sustains my objection, agrees with me, and my client slips a 5 over. That never happens.
As long as he's not slipping the 5 to the judge, you're doing good.
Yeah, you're doing fine. That's great. Oh, all right. So we've talked about just getting organized and knowing what you want, the decision-making process, and embracing an understanding of the emotion versus the intellect. If I could say anything as the vessel of legal ignorance here, I think this is just a reset for me of understanding how my lawyer is going to interact with me and how I should be expecting these conversations to go. And I hope if you're listening to this and you are going into the divorce process, that this helps you or grounds you in this expectation that your lawyer's not your friend. And for this process, for the sake of this process, you probably don't want them to be. And let's go ahead and get divorced. Is that fair?
I think that's more than fair because, I mean, when you think about it, you want your lawyer to be objective. You want them to be on your side, but friends are not objective. They tell you what you want to hear. That's not going to help you if you're going to lose by hearing what you want to hear. You want to know the truth. You want to know the truth. And you can find out the truth in the Divorce Roadmap 2.0 if you want with Karen, but you can also read the book. Where would you like to point people to learn more about your good work, Karen? They can find me on my website, KarenCovy.com. That's KarenCovy.com. There's no E in Covey, or I'd be related to someone famous, and I wouldn't have to work for a living. So you can find me on my website. The book's available on Amazon, and the roadmap is available on my website as well. And we will put links to all of those resources in the show notes, so you're just one click away from Karen Goodness. That's all. It's just one click. One click, and you're on the road. Thank you so much, Karen. Pete, this was great. I think I'm going to go home tonight and watch a little Thelma and Louise, though. I'm going to 1.0. You still haven't gotten past that, huh? I'm actually going to recut Thelma and Louise. I'm just going to put a cutout of your head on top of Gina. Can I do that? Is that okay? Is that probably some sort of copyright? For me being 3 for 3 and being called brilliant, you won this round, Pete. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. On behalf of the good Karen Covy and Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you right back here next week on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships. Seth Nelson is an attorney with Nelson Coster Family Law and Mediation, with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of Nelson Coster. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.